Well, howdy do. I hate to jump on the bandwagon, but it's raining, not working. Been indoors today, just putzing about, enjoying the not so radical talk radio shows on the radio, and of course plunking around on Facebook and other websites. And I guess the lab leak, likely being the origin of the Kung Fu flu, is a thing, according to the Department of Energy. I'm not sure what. I did not read the article because, well, there's a whole section of it. I mean, I'll get to it. I promise you, I will. And if I have anything to correct, I certainly will. But one would have thought what is it? What's the NIH? Let's talk about them for a second. National Institute of Health. You figured they'd have figured this out by now, especially considering the fact that they actually funded some of this research. They call it gain of function. So here's some terms that we were introduced to like in the first 6 months, maybe sooner. And to complete a previous thought, there were just me and my average middle-class pals. And some of the folks, we all figured about 4 or 5 months into this thing that the open market bat stew or whatever, I guess wet bats, right? It was wet bats. I call it bat stew because the whole thing's just been farcical, all of it. That was supposed to have somehow resulted in this happening. We watched the media beat on a president. Nothing no response he could have made was going to work because they were just, but anyway, 4 to 5 months in, and for some of us sooner than that, because we're just skeptics and cynics naturally, knew that it wasn't a stinking bat. We'd started learning these new terms: Wuhan Lab, gain of function, the National Institute of Health, things we'd never heard of. World Health Organization, I think we heard of that before with the whole Ebola thing that, remember when the Hussein actually, bring him over here to treat him. We didn't like that idea either. Obama, by the way, not Saddam. But anyway, so we start getting introduced to these new terms, and those of us that are already skeptical, we've already moved away from the open wet bats, open market bat stew, whatever they were trying to sell us. For one thing, we watched how the Kung Fu flu was used to foment this huge power shift, and we watched in horror as our fellow citizens acquiesced rather sheep-like, lemming-like, and with little pushback to a response by our government and officials, including the medical community. Is very disturbing. The education community, even churches failed, in my opinion. And the response that we initiated has been proven ineffectual at every level. At every level. Proven ineffectual. This thing ran its course. I would say that once people figured out on their own, by the way, or in the privacy of their doctor's office, that their comorbidities were going to be a problem, excessive weight, diabetes, previous existing respiratory conditions in particular, some of us with heart conditions need to be more careful, I suspect, although I haven't got it yet. Everyone around me has. And the vaccine caused me issues for real. But see, I can't even tell you what my doctors had to say about that because I fear for them, particularly in the state of California. But they agreed with me that my immune response to the vaccines was detrimental to my well-being. We'll just leave that there. But what about these terms that we were introduced to? Well, the gain of function is the one that concerns me the most because I know a lot of people have had COVID. And they talk about the long COVID. Well, I don't know that that's a thing. However, it is known that respiratory infections, absolutely, of any type, particularly of rhinoviruses, can have long-term deleterious effects on the sufferer, for sure. And it's obvious that with this particular Kung Fu flu, that factor is has been accelerated and or it's more powerful. And I know several people who have had that experience. And I don't make light of that. I think that's a gain of function. To take something that often happens with respiratory viruses and making that worse. I also think it is potentially a gain of function. Hey, these are terms they introduced us to. Wouldn't that, from a place that doesn't particularly value its own population? So maybe gain of function might also mean it's harder on older people, harder on obese people, harder on people with pre-existing conditions. Is there anything outlandish about drawing those things together, about tying that bow? And then my friends who have had it, I've had it more than once. Remember, I come from a generation, if you have the chicken pox, the measles, the mumps, they got us all together just so we just get it over with, because we knew that we'd have immunity. I'm not saying it was smart, by the way. The shingles thing in my generation now probably says, it wasn't a great idea. But we were pre-chicken pox vaccine, just so we're clear. But we certainly didn't get chickenpox again after we did that, right? And again, relative to these new terms, they're selling us gain of function, which only happens in laboratory research, which the NIH is our nation's medical research agency. I kind of have a problem with that anyway. And you should too, just so we're clear. Come on, come on. The great experiment isn't working, putting these people in charge of everything. Jeez. So another gain of function, again, potentially, is we have a virus here that doesn't respond well. My immune systems don't respond well to keeping us from getting it again. That's pretty horrific. And that's not an accident. There's too many factors here for that to be accidental. And my take on it, and there was one study in Britain where about 30% of the people that they got together that volunteered, healthy people that they volunteered to get the virus and be part of clinical trials with various treatments, about 28 to 30% of them could not be infected. I'm hoping I'm one of those. I've never presented to a hospital with a cold or a flu. I don't know that I've ever had a cold, but I have had the flu I'd say 7 to 10 times in my life, where it was work missing kind of flu. But I've never presented to a doctor with a flu or a cold or any respiratory illness. Ear infections and sinus infections, yes. Might have been other reasons for that. But anyway, I've been around COVID numerous times and haven't got it. And there was, again, a study in Britain, a major study that they were trying. Healthy people volunteered, and about 28 to 30% of them would not present with symptoms when exposed to COVID. So some of us fall into that category, maybe. And I'm not saying I do, but I've been surrounded by it and not got it. Shared my bed with my woman who's had it twice and didn't get it. And again, we're looking at something here relative to what they introduced us to that certainly has a different pathology relative to immunity and such. But here's the finale. So what us average dolts, us radical right-wing folks, I guess, because we question authority, not radical enough in my opinion, but year one, and by the way, some of the pundits you're told not to watch on TV, and a couple of, Rand Paul, a U.S. senator, a damn nice man, by the way, has been all over this. And he's not the only one questioning the status quo. That no, we're pretty. There's all indications that this was a leak from a lab, and that this didn't happen in nature. And there's no reason to believe that gain of function of this magnitude happens in nature. And but more importantly, is just shortly after Biden gives us the okay, like that doddering old fool. Pardon me, the figurehead of the progressive socialist left gave the go-ahead, and now all of a sudden there's real news talking about the Energy Commission coming along and saying that, yes, chances are it was a leak from a lab. Now, it was, and in my opinion, it wasn't a leak. It was released. Donald Trump would still be president if not for mail-in ballots. You know it, and I know it. And he was a bull in the proverbial global china shop. pun intended, by the way, with the China shop. And they got him off the global pedestal on purpose. And they used us for their sick power shift. That's just my opinion. Anyway, that's enough out of me today. Try not to get any on you, and have a great day out there. And yes, look out for your fellow man. If you're sick, stay home. If you're sick, call in sick. Don't be out there coughing and wheezing and carrying on, because viruses spread that way, with or without a mask. Peace.